各位朋友们，大家好，安安大家好，我是苏探，欢迎来到今天的节目。今天因为乌克兰跟俄罗斯之间的问题之间的冲突也变得一天比一天还要紧张，所以今天为了让台湾人更加以了解乌克兰人的立场跟在乌克兰所发生的事情，以及来自俄罗斯的大外宣更加讯息的宣传，我有邀请一位来自 Lviv 就是乌克兰的西部的城市的朋友，他叫 Melanie， 欢迎来到今天的直播。 Melanie, welcome to tonight's show. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Hi, it's nice to be here. Thank you very much.
Can you give a brief introduction on yourself? What do you do? And why are you so interested in international politics and fighting Russian propaganda efforts?
Well, so my name is Melanie. I'm a civic activist. I'm a political consultant expert on communications. And the reason why I'm so interested in that is A, it's my job, and B, I'm very biased in that regard. I live in Ukraine. It's my homeland. I've been extremely kind of invested in the whole democracy and war thing that has been going on. So yeah, I was happy to be able to use my skills in that regard in this particular situation.
By the way, Melanie is a YouTuber and she has a very interesting channel, even though it's in Ukrainian, but you can also follow her on Twitter where she shares her opinions on international politics in English mostly. So tonight, as most of my viewers are Taiwanese, and recently the news in Taiwan are somewhat standing more on the Russian side because Russia has more relationships with Taiwan. There is a Russian embassy in Taiwan, but there is no Ukrainian embassy, and your countries unfortunately don't communicate much, and that's why there is a huge amount of misinformation coming from Russia. And Taiwan, being a target of a very aggressive misinformation campaign coming from China, I think that tonight we can discuss a lot of things, similarities and differences between what Russia does towards Ukraine and the whole world, not only in Ukraine itself, and also how China tries to convey a message, for example, that Taiwan is a part of China. And the CCP, how are they trying to influence the opinions both in Taiwan and abroad, make people have more favorable views on China? I think Russia is doing a pretty similar thing. Many of my viewers are actually well informed on China's unrestricted warfare. So could you give your perspective on what's going on in Ukraine, as there are many news on undeclared hybrid war and constant attack coming from Russians? What do Ukrainian people think about it?
Well, there has been so it's important to say two things. First, that Ukrainians have been at war, both hybrid war and actual war with Russia, for 8 years now. But the hybrid warfare part, yes, since 2014, since the occupation of Crimea and parts of eastern, So the thing is that although the 2014 is kind of the beginning that we all decided to, because that's when the active war went into its active phase. Literally, Ukraine has been suffering from Russian propaganda and from Russian influence since its conception as an independent country, so for 30 years now. The problem is that Russia has been largely successful in that regard for years because, politics change, ideas change, things change, people grow. We have gotten this amazing generation that was born after the dissolution of the Soviet Union, and they already had some very different opinions on what Russia is, unlike maybe those of older generations who didn't know any better. I'm not saying it's bad, I'm just saying that's just normal. So the reason why everything became so aggressive all of a sudden is that Russia noticed that there is an internal will from Ukrainians to kind of move away from this Russian influence, and we have our own path to go through. And it does not necessarily mean that we want to go follow that path with Russia. And so of course they dislike that, and that's when the whole thing started. So previous governments before 2014, that's important to understand, they had very good relationships with Russia. They had their way to kind of make negotiations, and there weren't any loud excessive statements, and they were comfortable in that regard, because if you're a satellite, you get all these money, you have this big country protecting you from whatever, you can do corruption, whatnot. And then in 2014, we were promised by then basically Russian proxy president Yanukovych that we would in fact move towards EU and all that stuff with the values, and we had our hopes very high up, even though we knew he was a terrible president, he was a terrible person, but somehow, we kind of had this course that we were moving along, and he was kind of agreeing with it. And then he did not sign the EU agreement thingy. And that's when Ukraine said no for the actual third time in 30 years. We said no, big time. And that's when Russia saw
the Ukrainian people
danger.
took on the streets that time.
Yeah, we had the revolution of dignity, and this is the biggest threat to Russia, because if Russian people see that we succeed without their influence, if they see that this revolution is successful, and it is successful, the reason why we have soldiers at the border is that Russia's losing. They're losing at corrupting us. We're moving forward. They have exhausted every other option they had, every single dirty trick. So they are going, full force now. So, of course, since 2014, the information warfare has blossomed into something unbelievable. We had whole huge channels on television. Thankfully, since a couple of months now, most of them have been banned by the National Security Council of Ukraine, because they were literally putting Russian narratives into our ears, financed by Russian Federation. I'm sad it took our governments, both of them, 8 years to do that. But TV is just the tip of the iceberg. We have pro-Russian, you have to understand that I think people in Taiwan can relate to that kind of an idea, because Russia has been siphoning billions of dollars into this infrastructure, into this media empire, into these messages, into these bots. Not only media, but also opinion leaders, all these new bloggers.
Like what China does towards Taiwan.
Exactly. It's the same thing. And Russia and China are in a way partners. And they have very similar modus operandi in that regard. So I think
they just
that
signed
is very
the joint declaration that China supports Russia's actions in Europe, including Ukraine, including what Russia is doing. Of course. Ukraine.
They all have, both countries basically are in favor of using things as concentration camps. Very well about those in China. And then the Russian, we can call them Russian-backed separatists, because that's the people who are in charge in those territories in the eastern Ukraine. They also have a concentration camp there, basically, where they torture and kill people.
And there are many Russian military members who just got discharged, and so that Russia can say, oh, no, we don't have our military there, but we kind of have former military personnel.
They're former military. They're private military contractors. They're just instructors. They come here to observe. But
they're volunteers.
Volunteers. Yeah, they're just Russian patriots who want to protect Russian citizens, that kind of stuff. The thing is that, we have so much evidence of their presence there. But somehow, up until now, there were still some people in Ukraine who were in favor in that, or they were we should look for to be friends, we shouldn't quarrel, we shouldn't argue. But you know what happened? Very interestingly, since Russia has been amassing troops at our border, so since January, the anti-Russian, anti-Putin sentiment is through the roof, even in the most. I hate to use that kind of Russian speaking, because I know many Russian speaking patriots, but even in those very surprising cities for me, actual
in
older
Eastern
people,
Ukraine, right?
Eastern Russian-speaking older men in their 60s who were who grew up in the Soviet Union. They're no, we're gonna take a gun and we're gonna fight Russians. That's what you actually get. This makes perfect sense. So they're trying super hard, but they're losing. I know it sounds bizarre when I say it, because literally war is at the door, but that's the reason why it's here, is because they're losing all the time.
Melanie, can you say what are the main mechanisms Russia is using against Ukraine to influence the public opinion in Ukraine? They love these. They have these couple of things. First of all, the plain ones, the stupid ones, the TV. Just feed them stuff through the TV, through the special kind of audience who will eat it up, and whatever. It's stupid narratives, pro-Russian,
no questions asked. But that's obvious.
Is it in Russian or also in Ukrainian? What languages are they using?
It's mixed, actually, because we have laws that say you have to speak Ukrainian on the television, and they really don't like that, but they have to. So the hosts are usually Ukrainian speaking, but then the politicians, they couldn't care less. So it's a mix. It's a mix, and also it's a good strategy. Well, we speak Ukrainian, we give you the truth, right? Whereas it's just pro-Russian crap. And then they have bloggers and opinion leaders who will sort of say, some neutral stuff from time to time, like, well, we understand the European aspirations of Ukrainian people, but, and then they use
There's
these
always
like,
a but.
These mixed half-truths, that's the best mechanism. When you lie outrightly, it's difficult. But when you say stuff like, oh yeah, we know the values are very important and everything, but well, it's the US expansion of Europe, and that's why Russia is protecting themselves. It's not Russia, fighting against Ukraine. It's NATO who wants to endanger Russia, and they're just defending themselves. And in this mix of like half truths and half lies, people actually believe them. People actually say, oh no, I've heard a thought that is super prevalent, even among some of the most, like the smartest pundits in the US even. They say stuff like, this is the war between the United States and Russia. And we're like, hey, we're literally here, haven't been fighting for 8 years. There isn't a single American boot on our soil. We only have our armed forces and volunteers who fight and die for 8 years. And you're telling us this is the war
15,000 people. 15,000 people lost their lives.
15,000 people, military personnel, millions displaced. The economy was destroyed. We lost control over a huge part of our country. And now these people make claims that, Russia's just defending against whom? NATO? Really? And so it's that, there's that. And then, of course, the biggest, I'm sorry to say that, but the biggest failure for us and the biggest problem has been international communication and journalists. You wouldn't believe how many corrupt politicians there are. We were always like,
and there is another problem in Taiwan, like same narrative that NATO is threatening Russia because Russia is only trying to protect themselves, and people in eastern Ukraine, they are Russian, they speak Russian, things like that. That's the same narrative that China is pushing towards Taiwan, actually. But just a single question: since the collapse of Soviet Union, it was Russia that has been attacking their neighbors, and it was Russia's actions that actually just make it quicker for Poland, for Czech Republic, for Slovakia, for Baltic states, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, to want to join NATO, to join the alliance of the people with the same mindset, with the same values.
For protection.
Yeah, for protection, not to be attacked. Because if you join an alliance with Russia, you will use your sovereignty to them. Just look at what they're doing with the CSTO, with their agreement, like when they send their soldiers to Kazakhstan, and when they're supporting the dictatorships around.
Look at Belarus.
Yeah,
it's done. It's done.
And Belarusians took on the streets. They wanted freedom. They wanted to live in a country which is like European, with the European mindset, with the European values. They didn't want to be ruled by Lukashenko, by a person for 30 years. It's crazy. It's not normal in Europe in the 21st century. It's not NATO expanding. It's the countries needing protection from an aggressor who is on the east and not in the west.
There has been this I relate, no problem. I think we can like vent out here to some people who don't know, who may be watching this for the first time, because it makes sense. I just love this like super cool argument that again, those international people use mostly. They're like, well, we promised Russia that we wouldn't expand NATO. I mean, Gorbachev promised, and then I had to actually not a single agreement signed. Exactly. Not a single piece of paper. And then Gorbachev, that we just had this agreement that had to do with Berlin and Germany. While Russian troops were withdrawing, we wouldn't expand NATO. And then I was talking about this with actually a friend of mine from Poland who was like, well, of course we wanted to join. I mean, I wish we didn't want to join NATO, but then we know Russia, we couldn't risk it. Same goes for Estonia, same goes for other countries. I mean, nobody wants to join a military alliance because it's fun. It's not fun. It's stupid. It's expensive, and it's gruesome, you know. But then it's not like Ukraine is like, oh, we just want to be with the cool kids. No, it's not that. Really, we're fine. It's just the problem is that Budapest Memorandum thing that nobody cares about. Back in the 1994,
when you lost your nuclear
arsenal, huge one of the biggest in the world, and we gave it away. And there were promises. There were like Russia actually signed it, and then said that we would protect you against whatever. And now
territorial
everybody
integrity.
pretends
They'll protect territorial integrity of Ukraine.
And now everybody pretends that it didn't exist. Now they're like, well, and I was saying, like, you know, okay, you didn't do anything in 2014. I'm ready to forgive you. Like, but now people like it, because in all seriousness, now everybody is scared of war. But need I remind you that we lost a strategic object. It's not just, I love Crimea. I used to go there when I was a kid. It's beautiful. It's gorgeous. It's full of nice people, Crimean Tatars who have suffered enough on their own. It's a minority who lives, I mean, everything is horrible about it. But also, you know, Black Sea, it's a horrible loss for our security. It's horrible. And nobody cared. I mean, they were like, oh, we are very concerned. I'm like, well, that's great. But now, what now? And now they're like, oh, Russia has all these warships in the Black Sea. What are we going to do about this? Well, maybe if you would punish them for taking Crimea, maybe we wouldn't have that problem right now. But then again, nobody wants to fight with Russia. Same goes, I think, for China. They're like, well, we're going to trade. We're partners. We have to, you know, earn money with them.
Biden administration, they think that they can at the same time cooperate and compete. No, you compete with the UK, you compete with Poland, you compete with France, with Germany, with Japan, with democratic countries. That's what competition is called, right? But you cannot cooperate with a dictatorship on one thing without just living and without losing on the other, because you do not negotiate with the bully. That's the thing I think that the current administration in the US should also understand. Like, there is like people like Jake Sullivan in the current like people related to national security that think that they can negotiate with Putin. They can just have their body talk with Putin and then find some kind of
look for diplomatic solutions with a murderer, with
like
a person
what
who
Kerry did during Obama's times. Yeah,
Georgia in 2008, everything. Like, did nobody study history for the past 20 years? And then there's Germany also, who are like the worst offenders. The worst, because they were the ones who, like, they're always accusing Ukraine of being super corrupt. Like, oh my God, you should like take care of your judicial system, of like your corruption, because we won't take you into EU. And we've been, by the way, like super successful in that regard. I mean, it's still kind of corrupt. It's still problematic, but we have an amazing civic society in that regard. And then these guys trade gas with Russia, and we are yelling over here like, you're putting yourselves in our position where we used to be in 2013, where we were so reliant on it that we actually that's the way to lose your subjectivity, basically. Do you know what's happening right now? You're literally like putting yourself on this gas
dependency.
It's like a drug. It's dependence. So like, but it's not like anybody can listen. They think they're so far away from Russia that it's fine. They think, oh, it's like far away. We're not going to lose like Bavaria or something. They're not going to invade. Maybe they're not going to invade Germany. Probably not. But then it's not the only way you can damage a country.
Poland, Czech Republic, you have Baltic states between you and Russia.
All of these unnecessary corrupt countries that nobody cares about. I know for a fact, like, I'm a big sympathizer of Poland, you know, in that regard, because we do have some difficult history, but, you know, not the time to dwell on that. One of the most loyal partner countries to us. And the reason for that is that Poles know what Russia is capable of. And Russia is super close to here, and they know. And I was super surprised with again, there have been tensions politically, but then Poland themselves, they have declared that, you know, in case of something, you have our full support and yada, yada, yada. And I'm so frustrated how there are countries that are literally members of the EU, of NATO, who are literally yelling out of their minds, like, look what's happening, and nobody cares. Nobody's like, oh, we're we need gas from Russia, we need trading partners. Every single top politician and German high political elite either works for Gazprom now, or like, how is that a coincidence? Why does nobody know? But again, I think I want too much from people. I think there's this horrible sentiment, and I don't know if, I guess people of Taiwan could actually kind of agree with me, is
they
that
can relate to that, yeah.
Yeah, I kind of think it feels like we're always a problem for everyone. We're ruining the party. Everybody wants to trade with Russia. Yeah, everybody wants to trade with China, and these countries can just not shut up and just be a part of a big empire and, give up their sovereignty. They're just ruining the party all the time. And that's the sentiment. And it's horrible because Ukraine has been surviving against all odds throughout centuries. Famines, murder, annihilation. Yeah, Holodomor, exactly. First World War, Second World War, occupation, Nazi Germany occupation, Soviet Union occupation. Insane. We've only had 30 years of our own, governance.
Trying to destroy your language, like what the Chinese rulers tried to do with the Taiwanese language. That's also very
people were shot for speaking Ukrainian, for writing in Ukrainian. Punishment in Ukraine at the time was that one of the most famous poets in Ukraine, Taras Shevchenko, as a punishment was forbidden to write in Ukrainian. That's how it goes. So, that. And so then these international media who are like, also, fun fact, based in Moscow, they're reporting on Ukraine, sitting in Moscow for like 10 years, head of Moscow Bureau of, New York Times, whatever. They sit there and they say stuff like, Russia should calm down a little bit. But have you heard of all of these horrible atrocities that Ukrainians do to Russian-speaking population? You know what? I haven't actually heard of any atrocities done by Ukrainians to Russian-speaking population in Ukraine. However, I have heard of so many atrocities made to Ukrainian speakers in Russia you wouldn't believe. There isn't a single Ukrainian-speaking school in Russia, even though there's a huge population of Ukrainians there. Russia has number one, it's number one in terms of the amount of diaspora, and next one is Canada. And not a single school, not a single Ukrainian culture center. In 2006, an activist that was he had an organization that was trying to organize Ukrainians in Russia. He was brutally murdered. And nobody cared. Oh. Nobody reported. He was killed in 2006. And his wife was attacked 3 days before him. So this whole idea that Russia is defending themselves because of Russian-speaking population, because of NATO, it works. It sadly works. We're doing everything we can.